Thank you and good morning. Thanks for getting up early to come out and hear about a subject that's near and dear to my heart. First of all, does anybody, I think it's kind of interesting that we're using a kind of a cocktail table here as a lectern. Does anybody else find that interesting? I've done a lot of public speaking. It's the first time I've ever used a cocktail table as a lectern, so this is fun. Secondly, this gentleman over here has a sight-impaired view. Are you going to be able to enjoy the show? You sure?
Be good.
Okay, just checking. Want everybody to have fun here. Well, community service. What I hope you take away from this discussion this morning is that community service is not just character building, it's career building. Community service is becoming one of the best ways for you to manage what the HR gurus are now calling career risk. Now, for by career risk, it's just a fancy way of saying getting laid off, which is what happened to me. You can call it economic downturns, you can call it downsizing, you can call it nasty corporate politics, you can just call it, life changes that happen to you. But whatever it is, community service is now quickly becoming recognized as one of the best ways for you to mitigate career risk. And it allows you to do that by basically giving you the opportunity to diversify your professional skills portfolio, much like you would diversify your financial portfolio. Now you're asking, okay, I'm out of a job, how does volunteering help me do that? Well, I'll tell you what it did for me is it allowed me to use my existing skills that I had in my day job and use them in an entirely new arena, which helped sharpen them greatly. Secondly, it allowed me to pick up quite a few new skills that I would not have been able to pick up at my day job at Northwest Natural. And third, my network, my professional network, grew exponentially. And after 27 years in the utility industry, I found that my network was growing pretty stale. I mean, I had a good network, and I was able to use that effectively to get a lot of things done, but I found that it wasn't growing very much after you make those contacts. So it really helped grow my network. So I hope my story of making this transition really after 27 years at Northwest Natural Gas, it was the only job I'd ever had in my life, leaving there, getting laid off, and how community service helped me happily walk away from that part of my life and move into the next phase of my life. But first, let me tell you how I got involved in community service, and in particular in the homelessness and housing area, which is really what interested me. Because frankly, I grew up here in Washington County, as Carolyn said, went to Sunset High School, then went down to Eugene, University of Oregon. Didn't have a lot of exposure to homelessness or housing issues. Didn't do volunteer work in high school the way a lot of kids are doing today, which is kind of a wonderful thing they're doing in the schools now, motivating these kids to do some community service. I had no exposure to that. So when I started right out of college at the gas company, their offices are right down in Old Town Portland. 2nd and Everett, just a few blocks north of Burnside. Now, everybody knows what they refer to in the Burnside area. There's the Burnside Bums, there's Skid Row. And I was right in the heart of it. And it's gotten a lot better today, but back in 1979 when I first started working down there, it was pretty rough. I knew I wasn't in Kansas anymore, let alone Eugene, when I was dodging panhandlers and kind of stepping over street people just trying to get from my car to my office. And that was really disturbing, but like a lot of people, it wasn't so disturbing that I did anything about it, because the world revolved around me and I was very ambitious. I was ready to just kind of set the world on fire as a young person with a brand new business degree. So I ended up getting used to it. I just got used to it. And in fact, after several years, I'd say I got so used to it that I'd say I was immune to it. I could walk around that Old Town area at lunch or wherever I happened to be going and not be able to recall whether I'd actually seen any of these homeless people. I'd become so hardened to that population that they now blended into the streetscape, much like a parking meter would blend in, or a lamppost, I didn't see them. And that was really disturbing to me when I realized that that had happened. But I didn't know quite what to do. I knew standing on a street corner, handing out dollar bills was probably not the best course of action, not the best strategy. You didn't know what they were going to spend the money on anyway. So I didn't know what to do, so, again, I didn't do anything. And then a few years later, I had, I guess, what you'd call a moment of truth, or an aha moment, or a miniature epiphany, whatever you want to call it. But I was working late one night. It was a bitterly, bitterly cold February night. And I was working on something that seemed terribly important at the time, but to this day I can't remember what it was. Must have been after 8 o'clock. Every now and then I could see a snowflake kind of come down past my 7th floor office window. The light from my office would reflect off of it. So I knew it was cold outside. And from my office I could see the cars on I-5, because I faced just across the river. And I could see these cars kind of moving back and forth as people were heading home from their day job, and I toiled away at mine. And as I looked past my computer monitor and I kind of watched these cars, I noticed something unusual that I hadn't seen before. There were these 3 flickering lights just below the freeway, just kind of hovering there. And they looked to be about 40, 50 yards apart. I couldn't figure out what they were. I thought, gee, are they UFOs? Am I starting to see things? So I went and I turned out the lights in my office, to try and get a better look, and I kind of went to the window and squinted. And then finally it dawned on me. These are fires. Homeless people were dragging driftwood, soggy driftwood, from the banks of the Willamette River, and they were taking it up underneath the freeway there where it was covered, and they were burning it to try and stay warm, to try and get through this bitterly cold night. That picture was very powerful to me. The fires, the unseen people. It was too dark. I couldn't see these people around those fires, but I knew that there were people not much different than me, huddled around those fires trying to stay warm. The cars passing overhead, oblivious to the human desperation that was happening just below them. And as I got in my warm car and I drove to my warm house that night out in Beaverton, I wondered, who am I passing by? Who am I not seeing, trying to get through this bitterly cold night? Well, it wasn't more than a couple of days after that a colleague of mine stopped by my office, a gentleman named Doug Yoakum. Now, Doug worked in another department at the gas company. He was in public relations. So I didn't mix with Doug very often, and it was unusual for him to stop by my office. So I invited him in, and he said to me that he was getting ready to retire, and I congratulated him. And he said that he was serving on the board of directors at a little nonprofit called Transition Projects that operated 3 homeless shelters for single men and women, and that because he was retiring, he was going to be leaving their board. And because they had a shelter that was not far from the gas company's offices, he felt like it was important for our company to have some representation on that board, and he was wondering if I might be interested in taking his place. Now, normally I would have, given him the speech about how busy I am and, the new job's a hassle and the kids with the flu, but it's sure nice talking to you, Doug, however that song goes. But because the image of those fires was fresh in my mind, I said, sit down, Doug. Tell me all about it. He said they had a great board of directors. He said they weren't connected. He said they weren't, some of the name people like you might find on a university or an arts board, but he said they were very dedicated, very connected, and there were some noteworthy characters on that board. He said they had a great executive director. He said they were fiscally sound. And he said he thought I might be interested because I had some experience working. I was at the time managing the sales and marketing department, which served a lot of multifamily projects. He said because of my experience with multifamily housing, he said I might be able to help them a little bit, as well as sales and marketing, maybe doing some fundraising for them. So I jumped at the chance Now, I didn't jump at the chance because I was smart enough, like I think you people are smart enough to think about career risk, which is why you got up early this morning to come here and hear about community service. I just had this image of those fires from a couple of nights earlier in my mind, and I saw this as, an opportunity to get involved and do something. But the fact was that I was managing my career risk. Over the next 10 years, I got many, many opportunities to do things, growth opportunities that were going to be very important for me later, unbeknownst to me. I had no idea that I would not retire from Northwest Natural at that time in my life. It was just the image of those fires. But the fact was, everybody okay? The fact was I was able to use my existing skills in a new arena. Remember, that was point number one that I said would really help you if you get involved in community service. And here's the way it worked for me. Sales and marketing skills, took those over to transition projects and found that fundraising was very easy for me. Sales and marketing in the utility business is all about relationship building. You're not selling used cars. It's not about, making the quick sale and moving on and you never see the people again. You build relationships with customers and contractors. I was good at that, and it helped me immensely as I went and did fundraising for transition projects. My management skills served me well as I was their vice chair, and I chaired their development committee responsible for fundraising. My project management skills got even better as I worked on special events for them. These big fundraisers that you go to, those are big projects to pull together. But they're projects nonetheless, whether it's in the for-profit world or the nonprofit world. It takes management and project management skills to pull those things together. And I had some experience with direct mail. As a utility, we do things with bill inserts. You get your gas bill or your electric bill and there's all that other junk in there. Well, I was responsible for a lot of that junk. But I don't work there anymore, so. But believe it or not, that stuff is pretty effective. People read it. So I knew what people liked to read, I knew what people didn't like to read, and so, of course, in the nonprofit world, you do a lot of fundraising. In the holidays, our mailboxes fill up with a lot of wonderful charities that are vying for your dollars. So I had some experience there, and that came in handy at transition projects, and I found using it in a new arena really helped me think about the skill and how to apply it in this area, and I think that can work for you as well. New skills. I never thought much about teaching. My dad was a teacher. My wife retired after teaching grade school for 30 years, so I have great respect for teachers, but I never really thought much about it. But at Transition Projects, I got an opportunity to do some teaching to some of these homeless men and women in their life skills program. Now, life skills, they're just talking about how to balance a checkbook, how to fill out a job application, how to negotiate a lease, how to do well in a job interview. And in fact, to this day, I still teach a class for them called mock interviewing, where you help these guys understand what it is that an employer is looking for from you in a job interview and how you can put your best foot forward. And I'll tell you, working with guys that have zero self-esteem because of what they've been through and may never have even had a job interview, it's extremely rewarding to show them that there are some things that they have to offer, and that simple things just like attendance and being reliable and showing up are very important to employer today. And if you can just simply get that out there, that you are reliable, you are punctual, you will be there for them, will carry the day very many times for you. They didn't get that. So I got some wonderful opportunities to do some things that I'd really never done before and never really thought about. Property development. Transition Projects built a new building about 3 or 4 years ago. I had some experience on the utility side of that, working with developers, just getting gas service to these buildings. But once that was done, I pretty much forgot about how the project moved. Transition Projects built a new building. They added a 22-unit shelter onto an existing shelter. So I got to learn about how that process works from the customer side, pretty much from cradle to grave. And that was something that was going to prove very valuable for me later on. Fundraising. I learned a lot about fundraising. I'm no expert. I just probably know enough to be dangerous, but I was able to pick up quite a bit about how grants work, challenge grants, foundations and how those people think and how they operate, endowments, capital campaigns, major gift work, annual appeals, these membership gift societies that you sometimes hear about. All of that was foreign to me, and after my community service time at Transition Projects, I felt like I knew enough at least to have an intelligent conversation with people about it. The third element, remember I mentioned, is expanding your network. Well, mine just exploded. Through the board of directors, I was connecting with 10 people right off of the bat, and then as turnover happens, which it does, I'd say after 10 years I probably connected with 30, 35 very committed, very dedicated individuals, and some that were pretty successful. Worked with a former mayor of Portland, worked with the COO at Providence, worked with a state representative, worked with the retired director of the Port of Portland, got to work with a fellow that was serving on Kulongoski's, Governor Kulongoski's staff. And I also got to work with some people at the city government. Since we were one of Portland's largest providers of shelter and services, we got some funding from the city, and occasionally we got to meet with them. So I made some connections with city government as well as other nonprofits. And I also got to work with our donors, which was probably the most rewarding part. Here are people that supporting us financially. They clearly cared about what we were doing. I got to meet them. I got to share with them why I thought we deserved their support and why I thought maybe we deserved more of their support. So that was very rewarding as well. So I felt like I was contributing. I felt like I was making a difference. I was getting to serve meals in these shelters. I was working with the guys. I was working with the donors. I enjoyed the fundraising aspects, building those relationships, but most of all, I felt like I had responded to a calling. I did not believe that seeing those fires and then having Doug Yoakum visit my office a couple of days later with this opportunity to join TPI's board, I didn't see that as just a happy coinkydink, you know, just a funny set of coincidences that just happened to happen. I felt like it was God moving in my life to just gently nudge me this direction and that, to tell me that here's an opportunity for you to get involved. And I felt good because I had heard that and I had responded to it in my own way. Meanwhile, back at the gas company, things are going okay. I mean, I had gotten a couple of nice promotions. I was managing a department of 30 people. I had a pretty big budget, and I was learning a lot, and felt like things were going pretty well. However, as everybody knows, what's happened to gasoline prices and oil prices, energy over the last 5 or 6 years has just gone through the roof. And being in the sales and marketing department, when your price doubles over a 3 or 4 year period, that has an impact on business. It just does. And so my budget ended up getting slashed. I had to lay off some people. And as your budget gets cut and your staff gets cut, as a manager of a department, pretty soon you're doing a whole lot less managing, a whole lot more putting out fires. As some of you, I see some nodding heads, you've been through this. It's tough, and I felt like I was becoming more of a fireman and a lot less of a manager. And because I frankly was good at negotiating my way through some of these issues that would come up, whether it was customers or employees, it seemed like there was this big funnel, and I was down at the bottom of it, and they were all kind of rolling down to the guy that was pretty good at doing it. And frankly, I was getting burned out. I was getting tired. I was getting very worn out. So in 2006, when they had a big reorganization, they closed some district offices, they let some people go, eliminated some positions. Mine happened to be one of them. And so I was out of a job. And for some reason, I felt liberated. Instead of feeling like, oh my God, I don't have a job, it was like, oh my God, I don't have that job. Instead of feeling like, what am I going to do? It was like, well, what do I want to do? I don't know. What do I want to do? Just a very interesting feeling. Now, don't get me wrong, your pride gets hurt when something like that happens to you. It's difficult to hear that you're expendable, that they can do without you. We all like to think that, boy, if we're not here, look at all the things that aren't going to get done. But the fact is, we're all expendable. It's just business, and I understood that, and I have no ill will towards my colleagues at Northwest Natural. They're great supporters of Habitat. But it made me face the fact that my priorities had slowly changed over the last 5 or 6 years. I was enjoying my volunteer work more and more, and I was enjoying my day job less and less, which was unusual for me because I, throughout most of my career, really looked forward to going into work, slaying those dragons. But I had changed, and it probably showed in my performance, frankly. So after 27 years, I left. Now, one of the nice parts about getting laid off is, in addition to the little sack full of money they hand you on the way out the door, is they feel so guilty about what they're doing to you that they put together a little program with an outplacement company. Now, there's a great word, isn't it? Outplacement. Where the heck did that come from? But that's what they call these places, and so I had a 6-month outplacement program that was paid for, and most people use these services to basically update their resume, sharpen their interviewing skills, and then they kind of jump back right into the same place that they jumped out of. However, I chose a different path. I didn't even think about my resume for probably the first 3 months. I used this opportunity to really do a lot of self-reflection, did a lot of kind of testing and questionnaires, and asked myself some hard questions and got some interesting answers. I asked, what am I passionate about? What have I done that's made a difference in my community that I've enjoyed? And finally, how do I want to be remembered? When you're in your 40s and 50s, you start occasionally going to funerals for people that are of your generation. And being the neurotic person that I am, I go to these funerals and I kind of look around and I say, I wonder who's going to come to my funeral. Anybody ever do that? It's okay. I mean, I know we're all a little bit, I'm not that different, But I thought, what are people going to say about me? And so, I decided what I wanted people to say about me is he tried to help. He tried to make a difference. So I made a decision at that point that I was going to pretty much not worry about how much money I was making, which is difficult because we all tie our self-worth to whatever our salary is. And I was going to look for something in the nonprofit world that had a homelessness, a housing element to it as part of its mission. And that also included fundraising as a chief component. So once that decision was made, I went about reinventing myself. I took inventory of my skills. The existing skills I had from my gas company job that were transferable, the sales and marketing, the management and supervision, the budgeting, the financial part that goes into managing a department of 30 people, and then the community service skills that I had and that I was able to tie actual accomplishments to. The fundraising, the adult education, the property development. Then I evaluated my network, and I was surprised at how big my Rolodex, how big my Outlook contacts had become. I printed that out before I left the gas company and spirited it away with me, and there were some wonderful names on there that I could take myself out to and introduce. And trust me, if you go through this, you're going to buy a lot of Starbucks coffee for a lot of friends of yours. That's just the way it goes. You're going to find all the Starbucks in town. But I had some wonderful people that I could go and meet with and talk to about what I wanted to do. I had the board, I had the donors, I had the government contacts and the nonprofit contacts. So after going through this program and putting a new resume together, I had repackaged myself as this. The little 60-second cell that you use when you're out there looking for work? Well, here's mine. I'll try and do it as well as I was doing it a year ago, but I'm a sales and marketing manager with an MBA and 20 plus years of experience in the sales and marketing field. In the utility industry, I used relationship sales and direct marketing strategies to generate customer growth at double the national average for one of the fastest growing utilities in the nation. However, more importantly, I spent the last 10 years on the board of directors at a little nonprofit called Transition Projects. As their development committee chair, I personally raised over $500,000 for them in major gifts and challenge grants. And I am now looking to use the power of sales and marketing for good rather than evil. And I'm looking for a nice little nonprofit that needs a little help in the fundraising area that has a housing mission associated with it. So when somebody would ask me, you know, tell me a little about yourself, Mark, you know, that's usually kind of the opening gambit when you're kind of out there networking. That was my 60-second sell. Now with community service, I had some accomplishments to put into that. I was able to talk about the money that I had raised and the things that I had done through community service. So I marketed this newly repackaged, reinvented person out there, and it wasn't long before this opportunity with Habitat opened up, and I jumped at it, and the board and I seemed to hit it off, and I liked what they were doing, and they liked what I had to offer. And so about 10 months ago, I joined Willamette West Habitat as their executive director, and I'm having a great time. So what happened? Unknowingly, I mean, I wasn't smart enough, but I had managed my career risk so that I was in a good position through community service to go out there and reinvent myself. I used my existing skills in a new marketplace, I picked up some new skills, and I expanded my network. So my advice to you is understand the value of community service. If you've been saying, this is something I'll do when I retire, or this is something I'll do when my day job is feeling a little more secure and stable, think again. Ask yourself, what are you passionate about? What have you done that's made a difference in the community that you really enjoyed? And how do you want to be remembered? And then go out there and find a nonprofit that you have a connection to, that's personally meaningful to you. Now, don't just go out there and find a nonprofit that, gee, there's some people on the board of directors you'd like to meet. They want people that feel a connection to the mission. So it could be that you know, you had a family member that's a survivor from breast cancer or some other disease, and there's your connection to whatever the cause is. But you have to make sure that there's a personal connection. Look for an organization that'll give you some opportunities to stretch a little bit beyond skills that you're going to get or getting at your day job. Look at their board, see if there's a network there. It's okay to do that. These nonprofits publish the names of their board of directors and usually have a nice little bio on each of them that you can kind of take a look at and see who's there. Assess your ability to contribute. We have a gentleman who's a computer software engineer, and he's a bit of a video guy. That's his hobby. He likes to do video things. So we give him an opportunity to help us with videos when we do things to promote Habitat for Humanity, and he loves that. Now, we also call upon him every now and then to help us with our software problems that we have, but the point is, he's getting something from us, we're getting something from him. It's a very nice symbiotic relationship, and that's what you want to look for. You have something to offer, but they should have something to offer you that you can learn from and grow. And then go out there and get involved. What I hope you take away from this is putting off community service is the wrong thing to do. It is one of the most rewarding, character building, and career building activities that you will ever take on. And serving others makes you feel pretty darn good too. Thank you very much for your attention this morning.
At this time, we'd like to take just a few minutes and see if anyone has any questions for Mark, upon which I will repeat just so we get it recorded. Questions? Yes?
Are you getting tied at all into Luis Palau City Fest?
Are you getting tied into Luis Palau City Fest?
Well, it's funny you should mention that, because we're going to hear from a gentleman from Intel in a little bit that's going to talk about the Summer of Service. So yes, we are. We have a We have a project this summer. Funny thing about Habitat, we're building 5 homes this year. You can keep about 20 people busy on any given day. Intel has, we have groups calling us that have 50, 100 people, and they want to know what they can do, and we're like, So we did put together a project this summer that has to do with some urban renewal at an older project that we did about 15 years ago, and we just want to come into these families it's an 11-home subdivision, and we want to say, hey, we've got all this labor. Why don't you let them come in and do some yard work for you, clean up the common area, maybe do some painting and that kind of thing. So yes, we do have a project that we're trying to partner with some of our friends from Intel that have been volunteering in smaller groups with us this year to do something that's loosely connected to the summer of service. Yeah.
Anyone else? In the back.
We have a number of homeless people that attend our church. How can we be sensitive and ask them what we can do besides taking them to our home?
Yeah.
So the situation is number of homeless people attending someone's church and how we can be sensitive to help without necessarily inviting them home.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a good question. If this was an easy problem to solve, it would have been solved a long time ago. And I don't know if you've heard, but there's actually a 10-year plan to end homelessness, and I think we're 5 years into it. So we just need to get through the next 5 years, and I'm told the problem's going to go away. What you need to do is treat them with dignity and respect. There are a number of social service agencies, nonprofits that target that population and help them get off the streets. Part of the problem is there's not enough bed space. You get somebody into a shelter, and the idea is you don't want them to stay there for very long. You want them to address the issues behind their homelessness. Maybe there's some benefits that they should be getting if they're a veteran, that because they just don't have an address or they don't have the capability to go through the mountain of paperwork, they're not getting. So you can help them get to that point, but then you have to have some place where they can permanently live, and there's just not enough affordable housing in this community for that. Habitat for Humanity serves people that are basically the working, I guess you'd call them the working poor. They're making between $20,000 and $34,000 a year. They're not homeless. They're living in wretched conditions. Substandard housing is what they call it. You and I would refer to it as squalor. But they're not homeless. So that's the population we're targeting. Then you have another group of nonprofits, shelters, that are trying to target this group that's in the 0 to 30, if you will, income range. And so, I would just treat them with dignity, treat them with respect. It's the whole there but for the grace of God go I attitude that I think you have to have. And then usually you can put together a list of nonprofits, phone numbers, people that they can call, community action, transition projects, whoever it is, they're all regional, that can potentially take these people in on a transitional housing basis. I hope that helped. It's a big problem, big problem. I think on any given night there's about 1,200 homeless people out here in Washington County, many of them families with kids. It's really disheartening. You think it's a city problem, but believe me, it's a problem that's happening out here, and because there's so much more green space, a lot of places for these people to hide. They're out there camping right now, rolling up their sleeping bags and getting ready for their day. It's unfortunate.
I think we have time for maybe one more question. Okay, right here.
Were there any surprises for you, Mark, in this transition from the profit world to the nonprofit world?
Did you find any surprises in transitioning from the profit world to the nonprofit?
No surprises, but if you're looking to make this transition, you really have to kind of check your ego at the door. You have to realize that you're not going to have the nicest office. You're not going to have the fastest computer. You're not going to have all the resources that you need a lot of times, and you just have to make do. That's the downside. The upside is you are doing something that is extremely rewarding, that is making a difference every day. I get up in the morning and I think about, what can I do today for our families? How can I raise money to get more of them into houses? What can I do to help them find our program? We help probably 5 or 6 families, sometimes as many as 8 or 9 each year, and it's all a function of how many houses we can build. For every family we accept, we turn away 10, 11, 12. And it's not because they don't qualify, it's just because we have to pick the worst of the worst, if you will. We have to identify out of 50 or 60 families that qualify for our program, we have to find the ones that need our help the most. And it's heartbreaking. It's just heartbreaking to turn away the others and say, apply next year. You know, maybe there won't be quite as dire a situation with these other groups, and maybe, you know, your situation will rise to the top. And you know what they're thinking? They're thinking, I've got to become worse off than I am now in order to qualify? How horrible is that? It's just the realities of this, of the situation that all of the Habitat affiliates are fighting with. So,
Okay.
but good question, you know.